Hi everybody. I want to show you a way today that I build color palettes. And this method, it kind of sort of throws color theory out the window. And it's not because color theory isn't important, but this approach to building a color palette can be a lot more fun, a lot more free and intuitive. And I really highly recommend trying this out if you're ever looking for some color inspiration and you just don't quite know where to begin. It's great for that. It's a great way to learn about color. I always learn new things when I study color in this way. So I just wanted to show you this method because I find that it opens up color in a really beautiful way. So I'm standing in my dahlia house here, my sunrise house. Dahlias are going crazy right now because I've been away. And this is a great place to start because how this color palette building method works is we're going to start with a single flower and we're going to look at that flower and we're going to start to pull colors out of that flower to inform the color palette. So now obviously with some of the dahlias, they very clearly have, sometimes they're bicolors, there's two colors going on. Those ones are really straightforward. I'm gonna work with one today. We're gonna see where we end up color-wise with this one over here. This is Ferncliff Rusty, and it's a really beautiful in-between color, which is a color that I love, which means that it's combining a couple of different colors. You know, there's a lot going on in there that really makes them a fun one to start off with. So I'm going to be picking dahlias more like this one. They are basically freshly open and the petals are not curling to the back yet, unlike one like this, which is clearly basically done. But even one like this, it is, you know, too ripe. And if I cut that, I'm not going to get much of a vase life. I'm cutting deep just in order to get my plants to start producing more good stems. These all have to go. So I sacrificed a few buds. That's a really good method because it'll signal some really strong growth to get put out with really strong straight stems. This is a really professional way of working. Don't tell Steve. I just had this cleaned up and he mowed, and now I've got a huge dump of old dahlia garbage that I have to clean up. So I'm just going to clean off these stems to get the functional actual dahlia that I want. And with a ball dahlia, we're looking at about a week vase life. So I don't mind leaving a few little buds for texture on a dahlia like this that has such a good vase life. But if it was any other type of dahlia, I would be cutting off most of those buds as well, just in order to really benefit that main flower. So when we're looking at these, and I'm just using the more riper one, it shows the color a bit more. Initially, we see a sort of coral colored dahlia. And when we're looking at them, if we start to look closely, we can see that the outer petals, the backs of them are pink, and the outer petals are sort of a softish orangey. And as we get closer to the center is darker and it's going into almost like a raspberry kind of color. So now's the fun part. Let's go take a walk through the gardens and the fields and let's see what flowers we can find that connect to the colors in this dahlia. All right, this is my first stop. This one's really exciting because it's such a great connection. These foxgloves, the insides of these foxgloves have the same sort of tones going on with kind of the raspberries, the sort of deep colors. I wanted to show you, I mean, can you see the connection here between these two flowers? So the inside of the foxglove, the throat of each bloom, is very similar to the overall color quality of these dahlias. This is very cool because all of a sudden we've added another dimension of color because the outside of these foxglove blooms are peachy or sort of a creamy apricot with also a similar kind of pinky corally color that matches these dahlias. So now I have another color that I've sort of connected into this color palette that I can also follow. Okay, here's another color jump, color connection. So this is a Strantia here, and it's sort of this plumish, soft plum kind of purple color, like a warm purple. Now, if we look at these dahlias, we can see that in the center especially, we're seeing the backs of these petals where they're condensed here is they're actually purpley. They have a purple tone to them, and they actually are mirrored in the color in these astrantias. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut a couple of these. Bonus is that they're a super long-lasting cut flower. So now we're having a little bit more depth to our color profile. We've got coral, we've got some peachy tones more obviously coming in, and now some more obvious purples. This is exciting. It's giving me like sunset, beachy vibes, tropical colors. So let's keep going. I'm doing a pit stop at my sweet peas. I have a few different varieties. For this particular palette, I'm looking at these sweet peas in here. They're sort of a hot pink, almost to a reddish. Some of them are a bit more tune tone. I love using sweet pea vine. So I actually use not just the stem of the flower, but I'm using these also as a filler and a foliage. So I cut a good length on these. This is how I pretty much am always using sweet peas in my designs, and they hold up really well as long as they have a nice long drink, like an overnight conditioning period. So I'm going to get some of these reddishy, some of them are verging into the hot pinks as well, and they're going to blend really nicely in with this dahlia. They're going to kind of echo the dahlia there. Okay, I'm just doing a little stop in my snapdragons. These are actually, this isn't the best season for this one. This is a Chantilly snap. So I've neglected these, as you can see. This color is making excellent connections with the dahlia, from the more pinky younger blooms all the way to the more orangey older blooms on here. It's echoing the dahlia quite strongly. It's also making connections to our foxglove. And where I'm at now in my palette, I'm wanting to add some more of the peaches, because the peach are toning down the real vibrant pops of color. I want to have, you know, something that's middle ground, that's going to act kind of as like a background, so that it's not all just intensity and intense colors, so that we could actually stop with our eyes and appreciate the pop in colors that there are just by putting a basis for them to shine. Also, next, we're gonna go pick out some yarrow, some achillea, which I have in all sorts of shades. So we're gonna go check that out next, because I wanna put some more fillers in here for my finished design. All right, I'm in one of my achillea patches. I've actually been cutting out of this one now for quite a few weeks, maybe a month. And so it's looking a little picked through at this point. What this one is, this is the Summer Berries mix. So a little bit more vibrant colors, some hot pinks, some white, some creams. What I'm seeing that connects nicely into this color palette are these ones here. This is sort of a peachy one, and a pastel peach at that. So I'm gonna grab these guys. There we go. And that's just basically, when we look at our color, it's incredible, because the younger blooms on this one are basically the same quality as the dahlia here. So that's the younger ones. And then the older blooms that are more faded on this one actually connected directly, incredibly similar, basically the exact color of the foxglove. So that just works out lovely. So we'll pop those in there. Now I've got these allium drumsticks. These are way beyond what I would harvest for a retail customer, but these are the perfect match to the astrantia from earlier. So they're just going to echo that sort of smoky purple that's already going on in there. So I'm going to get some of these. All right, I'm gonna start grabbing some more foliages now. Foliages are sort of also the backdrop for the bouquet, and they're gonna give it structure and they're gonna give the flowers space. So really important. This is Monarda, so bee balm. This I consider a foliage as much as it's floral, and there's some different colors going on here. I'm gonna grab this one here. It's sort of like a fuchsia, like a hot pink, and it doesn't connect as directly to the dahlia itself, although the backing on this dahlia has pinks in it, but it connects very closely with this sweet pea. So we're going to cut some of these. I get so much use out of this flower. It makes a great foliage even before it starts flowering, before it starts blooming in the spring. A little bit of a strong fragrance, perhaps. We'll get some of that. We'll grab some of this. This is just a alder. This is an alder. I always have to think, is it a birch or is it an alder? Either way, these are nice foliages to include. All right, here's my big bucket of flowers. So I'm gonna walk these over to my studio now. They need to sit and condition for a while. What that means is they need to rest and recover from being cut. And particularly for certain flowers like the dahlias and the sweet peas, the vase life is not going to be so great if I just start working with them out of water right away. They really need some time to sit and drink. So I'm gonna let them condition, and then we'll be assembling these flowers into a great big gorgeous garden bouquet. All right, all of my flowers have had a good long drink now, and they can be worked with without anything crashing. Before I start making this bouquet, let's do a quick recap on how we built this color palette. So we started with this dahlia that is corally, but it has backings in creamy orangey colors and purpley raspberry-ish tones as well. And then we found this foxglove where the freckles and the throat colors connect to the darker corally tones in the dahlia. And the foxglove introduced a peachy creamy color to our palette. Next, we stopped at the astrantia, which connect to the purple undertone in the dahlia, and especially near the center of the dahlia. We added hot pink reddish sweet peas, which connect to the pink corally tones in this dahlia. And then we stopped at the snapdragon, which makes multiple points of connections between these lighter pink tones and these tangerine oranges, which connect into the back petals of these dahlias, while the lighter pinky tones connect quite nicely to the foxglove. And following the peach from our foxglove, we added peach yarrow. Then we added on some alliums, which connect with the purple astrantia. And finally, as part of foliages, but also with some bloom color, the monarda, which connects again to the pink tones. So it's connecting with our sweet pea, connecting back to our dahlia. So we've got orangey peachy tones going this way and getting more peachy. We've got purple tones going this way. And then we also have a connection going into reddish pinks and hot pinks. Let's get started here. For this bouquet, what I'm going to do is a spiral technique, but starting with a base of greenery. So this is one way to do a spiral where I'm actually going to just spiral up my greeneries first because I want a little bit more precise placement on the flowers. I don't know if you caught that little edit there, but this is not alder. This is paper birch, this foliage. So I put my whole amount in there, and now I am going to pop some of this monarda or bee balm in. I love this stuff. This is one of my favorite things this year, now that my little patch of monarda has actually matured and gotten big enough. I find the flowers last a really long time and kind of can be used in all the stages and even into the seed stage. Once the flowers have sort of died out, it leaves a really interesting seed head as well. And I'm curious this year to try drying this one as well. So I've put about half of my monarda in. I'm keeping a few stems to add at the end of this bouquet so that I have some foliage to be able to frame out my finished bouquet. Holding my stems loosely, and you can really see I've created a spiral and the stems are all going in the same direction. That's really important. I know there's another method that I was taught for bouquets where you just sort of crisscross your stems. And the struggle with that one, the trouble with it is that you can create breakage in your stems because it's so hard on the stems. But the spiral, when all the stems are actually going in at the same angle, is very gentle on the stems. It also makes it a lot easier to add in, edit your bouquet as you go. So here we go. I am going to start with some of my sort of more filler flowers and just start basically threading these in and putting them in on the sides, laying them in as I go, threading them down, always keeping track of the angle and making sure that I'm placing them in at sort of the same angle. So that was my astrantias. There was about 3 astrantia by the time I cut them down and sort of sized them down. I'm going to put my snapdragons in next because they're sort of all different and all wonky. And this is not an ideal cut flower, just for your information. This is fine for the purposes of this bouquet and for what I need it for, but not exactly retail quality because the stems are not even straight. So just keep that in mind. This wouldn't be the type of quality that I'd be selling to a florist, for example. And I just broke one of my own little pieces of bee balm here, of monarda, so that's a risk with adding flowers in from the top. And I just want to balance. I only have actually 4 of these sort of really matured snaps. So I'll just sort of center one, and 3 can go more on the exterior, but if that's not looking right, just keep in mind that odd numbers can be a lot easier to work with. Okay, and on a similar note, we're gonna get these foxgloves in right away as well, using a lot of line flowers in this bouquet. So that's one reason why I'm putting them in right away, so I can make sure that they're spaced out and or grouped or placed in a fashion, because there are so many of them, easier to do that now. All right, I will go ahead and add my dahlias. Sometimes it's easier to do that right away because you start to get thick stems with dahlias. So shoving the thick stem now into the bouquet, I have to do that with a little bit of skill and caution and care. So before I do that, I'm just gonna go through and pull up any of the foliages that have sunk down so that I don't bruise any leaves. Just make sure everything's at the height that I wanted it to be, because as you're adding things in from the top, sometimes you're pushing things down that you didn't mean to. And what I don't want is, I don't want leaves down low here near my binding point. When I start shoving dahlias through there, I'm not really shoving them. I'm being gentle. It's not the best word to be using, but you know what I mean. So I just want to be mindful of that and keep the stem area, the binding point area, nice and clean for this part. So I'm going to take my biggest one here, kind of one of the fuller ones. I want to put that basically centered or near the center. So I'm just going to wiggle that guy in. So as it goes down, I'm holding my stems really loosely, and I'm just wiggling, 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 kind of back and forth with my fingertips, just rotating it down. And there we go. Now I can grab the base here, and I can actually rotate it the way I want. So dahlias are sometimes a challenge to work with because they have faces. So they have a plane on the front of them, and they basically face in a certain direction. So if I'm putting a large dahlias in, usually it's going to be more successful if I'm facing them more into the bouquet. And I also will be watching to make sure that they're not all facing in the same direction. So get that guy in, and not all of these have to be threaded in. Because I've built a spiral, I can also sort of just open up my stems here and lay the next dahlia in where I want it, and then close up my stems around it. So you can see I have somewhat grouped these 2 bigger dahlias, and I have staggered their heights for a little bit more of a unstructured look for this bouquet. Now I forgot to mention it, but I have basically six dahlias that are in an open stage, and I'm also including one that'll pop open. But if you're curious what sort of numbers I'm working with, by the way, I just cut these willy-nilly. I was not trying to cut for a specific amount. And generally, if you work in odd numbers, it will be easier for you to create a pleasing look. But I tend to not do things the way you're supposed to, so I will just carry on. So again, I'm placing this dahlia near the exterior and just laying it in, which works because I created a spiral as I was adding my stems. I'm actually going to pull this foxglove here. I want more space between those two, so I'm going to pull that and put that on the outside. I like to include foliages from the dahlias, but I also think the buds are really cute, and too many will look weedy, too many will not be great. But in market bouquets, I love including a little bud. It really does add a nice texture and more visual interest to the bouquet, more of a feast for the eyes and more perceived value. So just a tip. Okay, this is the last dahlia. We're gonna lay it over on this side. And again, just to reiterate, I'm always placing my stems down on an angle. Okay, so now I have my dahlias placed in here, and I'm just gonna sort of eyeball it, sort of see where do I wanna have a little bit more substance. So I'm seeing that I want a bit more substance on this side. So I'm just gonna borrow this piece of foliage and just slide it over to that side. Now I've created more of a rounded shape again. What I have left are the achillea, so I'm gonna add these in. These are great because they're gonna add, basically fill in holes because they're flat on top. Really, they're gonna fill in holes and create kind of a nice backing for the dahlia, but also a place for the eye to stop. They add a lot of meat to the bouquet, but in a good way. And the stems are nice and thin and strong, so these are great. I will never regret planting achillea, and probably I need more. I probably need to make more room in my field and add even more, because I just find them so helpful, and because the flower holds on so long once it's bloomed, it gives you time for cutting it. You don't have to cut it right away. It lasts a long time. Next, I'm going to add my 3 purple alliums. Now I could do different things with these. I could float them off. If I was doing a more asymmetrical style, I could float them off to one side, group a couple of them for that sort of style bouquet. In this case, I'm going to start with one in the center or near the center. Slide that one down, and I'm gonna go sort of a floaty height. It's higher than the base layer of the bouquet. You can see it here. So sort of adding another dimension. This is how we create the wildflower look or the garden style bouquets. Bouquets with a lot of movement is we're considering space. We're adding air with our placements, staggering our height so that we get a more natural look. It's a look of a garden. It's a look more like how flowers would actually be growing in the garden. Don't mind the scratching noise if you can hear it. I don't know if my microphone is picking it up, but that's just my goats. So as a reminder, I saved some Monarda for the exterior of the bouquet to frame it out. And the other thing that I still have to put in are the sweet peas. Now, as I mentioned, I like to include sweet peas on the stem, the sweet pea vine. It gives me a lot more length to work with. It gives me these lovely foliages and textures and tendrils. What I find the easiest with sweet pea is to just add it basically right at the end. And again, that technique of sort of opening up our bouquet a bit, the sweet pea works really well if you just lay that in, jiggle that in a little bit as you lay it down. And because it has multi-branches, that helps to work those kind of just into the bouquet. And basically I'm adding them at the end, but they don't look like they've been added at the end because they're going to be intermingling within the bouquet. So I have about 9 stems of the sweet peas. In case you are curious, there's really no right or wrong answer. In this case, I'm not cutting to any kind of valuation. I'm not trying to hit a certain price point. So I just cut kind of whatever felt right. So I'll just continue sliding those in and rotating my bouquet as I go. And they add such a gorgeous texture. And I'm going to save this one here, this sort of straight, nice straight one. This one's going right down because I could easily slide that one down the center here. See where it is at the bottom, and then I can pull it or rotate it as I need. One more here. There's really nowhere specific to place it. This bouquet is kind of fully loaded. Gorgeous thing. We'll just put it here. And I want to actually, looking at these 2 foxgloves here, they ended up clumped together. I don't need to actually necessarily pull one out and move it, but just rotating the one away from the other one is to create more space. So there we go. So that's the bouquet, and I'm just going to add my filler on. But before I do that, I'm going to have a look at it now. And the great thing, because I followed a spiral technique, the great thing is that it's really easy for me to move things around, lift, lower. I can see if I've lost any flowers. So for example, this dahlia, it ducked down a little bit. So I can go through now. Here's another foxglove. We're going to rotate that one over so we can enjoy it in its own area in the bouquet. So that is the great thing about a spiral. It really just gives you the ability to cleanly make changes without causing any damage. Very worthwhile skill to learn. So I can look at my overall shape as well and make sure that I've achieved somewhat of a rounded shape, which is my sort of intention for this style, and make sure that I'm not losing anything and things are where I wanted them to be. All right, so I'm happy with this. So now I'm going to just put my last bit of monardas around the outside, sort of just to frame out that bouquet. So as I do this, I can kind of keep an eye on where there might be, for example, here I'm seeing some nice foliage. That's just nice and framing out, but on this side I can see I have a little bit of a need for some here. So that's what I mean when I say framing it out. Just basically I'm wanting to make the outside just to look fuller. So you can see I'm dropping the height on these as well. And I'm going to borrow, not that, I'm going to borrow this piece of alder here and put it on this side. There we go. So any little short bits, that's a really handy thing to save, and when you get to the end of your bouquet, any little short bits that you might have had, you can add them at this point, and they are never a waste. So there we go, that's our bouquet. Very sunsetty, very gorgeous. So I will trim that down. Make sure everything gets snipped, everything that might be a touch shorter. And as usual, I like to use sisal. I like to use sisal or string, something that's biodegradable, to tie off my bouquets. So I'll give you some close-ups now on this pretty thing. You can get a better look at it. I really hope that this approach to color brings you a lot of enjoyment and a lot of ease and opens the world of color up to you a little bit more with some freedom and some room to explore. Let me know if you want to see more example videos of how to put color palettes together like this. I very much enjoy this as a practice and I would be glad to do it again. Thanks for hanging out with me on this little color journey, and I hope your day is beautiful. If you have any questions, I know we covered a lot in this video besides just color, so feel free to drop your questions in the comments, or if you have comments for me. I love hearing from you. Thanks for being here, and I will see you next time. And don't worry, for those of you who really want to dig even further into color in terms of market bouquets, we still are going to be looking at using color theory itself as a tool for informing our market bouquet palettes as well.